Good evening. My name is Jackie Parker, and I would like to welcome you to the DeSales Scholar Series, From Tragedy to Triumph. Tonight we come together to remember the 20th anniversary of September 11th, 2001. It was 20 years ago that many of us lost family, friends, or maybe knew someone in our community who was taken too early. There were almost 3,000 people who were killed that day, and more than 6,000 others were injured. From our first responders to coworkers helping each other evacuate out of the World Trade Center towers, to servicemen and women who have continued to fight for our freedom, we have seen people stand up and be heroes. September 11th, 2001 is one day in our history where most of us can still remember where we were and where we heard the news that forever changed our lives. It is one day that has impacted us all very differently, even those of you who are not born yet. But today we come together as a DeSales University family. We remember those who lost their lives, including one of our DeSales young alumnus, Daniel Gallagher, an accounting major from the class of 2000, who was working at Cantor Fitzgerald in the World Trade Center and lost his life. I am joined here by a phenomenal group of individuals who are going to share their stories. I would like to start by introducing our host, alumna of the class of 2015, and author of Rise from the Ashes, Peyton Lynch. She is joined on the stage with her husband, Jonathan, who has lost his father, Robert Lynch, on 9/11. And along with her and her husband is Daniel Gallagher's family, friends, and faculty who knew him best. Before we start here today, I just want to remind all of you who are joining us from home to use the chat box. At the end of the presentation, we will be taking questions. I am also joined here by my colleague, Lena Barbieri, who will be moderating today's event with me. We would like to again thank all of you for joining us, and I would like to introduce you all to Miss Peyton Lynch.
Thank you so much, Jackie. I'd like to start off this evening taking a moment of silence for those we lost on 9/11 almost 20 years ago. Thank you so much. Where were you on 9/11? Many of you in this audience are students here, and it's likely that you were not even a twinkle in your parents' eye at the time of 9/11. But if you were alive at the time, it's likely that you have your own personal story to tell. I'll never forget where I was. My name is Peyton Lynch, and I'm a 2015 graduate of DeSales University. I grew up here in Pennsylvania, and I was only in second grade at the time. If we're able to pull up some of the slides, you'll be able to see second grade Peyton. And I look pretty similar to what I did in second grade. I'm about the same height. I only stand at 4'11". And I have a few more teeth. You can't tell because I do have my mask on, but those did grow in, and I still love animals. So really not much has changed since then. I remember so many kids being picked up early from school that day, and we were just not one of those families. And I remember coming off of the bus that day and finding my mom glued to the television. And even as a young child, you can tell when something's wrong, when your parents are sad. And I could recognize by the worry in my mom's voice that it was bad. But even living only 2 hours from New York City, I had never known anyone personally impacted by the attacks on 9/11, and frankly, I had never even been to New York City before 9/11. In fact, I distinctly remember my dad driving us into New Jersey to see the now twin towerless skyline days after 9/11. I will never forget the image of those buildings there that day. You still could not get into the city, and the smoke was still coming from those buildings. Do you know anyone who was personally impacted by 9/11? It would be years later until I would learn of anyone with a personal connection. I was on a date on the anniversary of 9/11 in 2013 with my now husband, John Lynch, in September of 2013. You'll see a photo of us on this next slide here. You can see we do love animals. And we actually added one more to the pack. We now have a cat. My husband's allergic, but he consented, and I love him for it. We had only started dating in May of that year, and so I did not know of his story, and it was our first September together. So what I thought was a casual date was actually John sharing his story. Moving to the next slide. Sitting in the middle of that dimly lit Bonefish Grill restaurant that night, and if you've ever been to Bonefish Grill, you can attest that it is dimly lit. But I was grateful for it because I just could not hold back my shock and sadness as my husband shared his story. And as much as I remember that day, no one tells his story better than him, so I'd like to invite my husband, Jonathan Lynch, to the stage to share.
Hey everybody, my name is Jonathan Lynch. I am the oldest son of my father, Robert Henry Lynch Jr. My wife and I, we currently live in Florida. We used to live right here in the Lehigh Valley. My wife went to DeSales, we both went to Parkland, and love Pennsylvania, but we headed down to Florida to work for the mouse. We are big fans of Walt Disney World, and that's where we make magic every day down in Florida. But thank you so much for having us here today. Thrilled to be here. This is a very tough week, very emotional week as always. Not a day goes by we don't remember my father and all the men and women who lost their lives that day. So this is a great time to be here and be with family this weekend. So glad to spend some time with you now, and then heading off to see the family all weekend. So can't wait. But like I said, we used to live here in Pennsylvania, 9/11, 2001. It was a Tuesday. It was absolutely gorgeous. At the time, I was 13 years old. I was in 7th grade, right down the street at Whitehall Middle School. That's where I went at the time. And being, a couple hours from the city, we knew the city very well, of course. My parents divorced at a young age, so I kind of bounced back and forth between Mom's house in Pennsylvania, and my dad bounced between New York and New Jersey. So it was a regular morning, and I'm going to be honest, school was not my thing. Not at all. English, math, all of it was not my best. I was really good at lunch, really good at recess, and I was really good at art. Art class was my thing. So Tuesday mornings were always really special because art was a double period that morning, first and second. If you remember back in school, sometimes you get a really long class. So it was awesome, great morning. Everything was doing normal, working on my art project. Really felt really strong with my art materials until the art teacher from across the hall came running into our classroom. Told my teacher, Mr. Moyer, turn on the TV. Something's going on. He didn't know how to even explain it. So, all the classrooms had those big box TVs. They weren't flat screens or anything fancy. Mr. Moyer flipped on the TV, and it was the World Trade Center. It was the first tower, was already hit. It was bleeding smoke. All you saw was flames and just black, just spilling out everywhere. So the class, we're all like, what's going on? I'm watching this and I'm like, wait, okay, yeah, I know those. I've been there. I know that place. And everyone around me is still not sure. Remember, we're in 7th grade. Middle school is really an awkward time. Your body is going through all these things. It's really hard to process all of this. So I raise my hand once I figure this all out, and teacher calls on me, and I'm like, my dad works there. And the look on his face, I remember to this day, he was like, I hope he's okay. And that's all Mr. Moyer said. So I'm watching, and everyone's starting to continue back with their work, and I'm still trying to process what the heck is going on. And the principal, or maybe it was one of the office ladies, goes on the speaker, teachers, please turn off all TVs. Teachers, please turn off all TVs. So my next couple classes, I'm kind of floating around like, someone going to tell me what's going on. So finally I get to lunch, and the office comes to the lunchroom and says, John, come down to the main office. I'm like, okay. kind of freaking out now, kind of panicking because I know something really bad happened, and my mom's on the phone. So I'm like, okay, my mom's going to tell me what's up. So my mom tells me, John, your dad's okay. My dad is in the city that day. He did go to work that day, but he's all right. He called. At the time, cell phones were not really a thing. You know, my dad had one of the first cell phones, which was like a block. It was like massive, really heavy. You could like beat someone over the head with it. So my dad called. He's out of the buildings. He's out of the buildings. He's fine. And he called and he said, I'm good. This is really bad. This is really bad. This is really bad. I love you and I'll call you back. To this day, we have that message back when voice messages used to have these little boxes at your house, little cassette tape. We still have that. So my dad worked at the World Trade Center. He was the property manager of 2 World Trade. He had a really cool job, you know, suit and tie, briefcase. Anything that happened at the World Trade Center went through him. He knew about it. He planned it. He organized it. Ran the whole property, or one of the buildings at least, the 2, the South Tower. So by having such a really awesome job at the city, everyone there knew him, which was really cool, but yet kind of annoying when my dad would take me to work often. Everyone would be like, Bobby, hey, Bobby, as we were trying to go grab lunch or go skate at the park or go to a Yankees game or something. So we find out later on that my father went back into the building. He was out, he was clear, but went back in to help evacuate people. He knew every inch of these buildings. He knew every emergency exit, every emergency protocol. And I know that when the fire department or the police or the EMTs, when all these emergency responders arrived at the World Trade Center, they needed to talk to one person. And that one person was my father, to get them where they needed to be so that they can help people. And then my father took it upon himself to help people out as well. Seeing how he was known so much by everyone who worked there, we kind of have a timeline of his morning. As people were running out of the buildings, or people that my father helped out, we kind of know where he was throughout that morning. So, like I said, he did call. He left a voice message at home, and we all rushed to my dad's house in Jersey. My entire family was there, all of us. The driveway was filled, the whole street was filled. So we were in Whitehall, left Pennsylvania, flooring it to New Jersey. There was not a soul on the road. No one. Everyone was so afraid that no one even left their house. So we were driving on, we were the only car we could see, and we got pulled over for speeding. On September 11th, we got pulled over for speeding, driving to New Jersey. My sister's in the car, I'm in the car, we're crying, we're freaking out. My mom yells at the police officer and says, "Their father's in the towers." And the guy's like, go. So we get to my family's house, and we still did not hear back from my father. Days went by, we started hearing from people who my father helped out. Like I said, everyone knew him. Everyone knew us, the family, so they knew who to call. And at the time, you couldn't get phone calls, you couldn't get a lot of things. So my dad was a hero of 9/11. Unfortunately, he was not able to save himself that day. He was able to save a lot of people. He was able to help a lot of people evacuate, which is really amazing. I wish he was able to help himself as well. But I do know he helped people who needed to be here today so that they were going to do something really amazing. Everything kind of happens for a reason. And I believe my father was supposed to be there, and he was supposed to save these people. He was supposed to help people who needed to be here now. We had a funeral, shortly after, and it sucks, It's really, really not fun, and not a day goes by we don't think of him. A couple years later, about 5 years, the 5-year anniversary of 9/11, we get an invitation, my family and I, to the White House from the president. And we're like, all right. And my father is receiving the 9/11 Heroes Medal of Valor. We're like, wow, this is a big deal. We find out it's for police officers, firefighters, EMTs, emergency responders. And we're like, Dad wasn't a firefighter. Are we in the wrong spot? And the president said, no, yeah, it's for all these first responders and your dad. Because he went back in when he didn't have to. So it was really special. I miss him, love him. I have an older sister and 3 younger brothers, and we try to tell his story, keep his memory alive. And that's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. As I said, no one can tell it better than he can, and I'm so proud of the legacy we have in our family, knowing that my father-in-law was that type of person who would go back into the building to help others that day. It's been many years since John has shared that story with me. So many years since that date, well, 2013, right? And so much in our lives has changed. If we head to the next slide, you'll see a picture from our wedding, which was 6 years ago. And this is one of my favorite photos from that day. We saved a seat for his dad in the front row, and then the photographer took the photo, moved it behind us, and got this incredible shot here, which I'll cherish for the rest of my life. Like I said, so much in our lives have changed. We moved to Florida, we worked for Disney, our dream careers came true. And we got more animals, as I shared. And we've had a lot of fun along the way. We've done a lot of traveling. We've been very blessed in our lives. But during the past year, things sort of got a little tough for everyone, right? If we head to the next slide, I'll share a little bit about our story. Here we are at Disney World, our favorite place in the world. But on the other side, you'll see some things that have been not so fun for us. So during the pandemic, we were all challenged in the past year. And during that time, you can imagine Walt Disney World was closed. And so John unfortunately was furloughed and then lost his job. I'm happy to say he is back at work now. I went working completely remote and continue to be for the past 15 months. So all the pains that many of you are familiar with from the past year. But on top of that, we've been struggling with infertility and are about to start our first round of in vitro fertilization next month. We've been trying for 2 years. And it's been the most challenging thing I've ever had to do in my whole life. And even though it has been so challenging, I have learned so much from watching how John has gone through this experience. And I realized on that day when he shared his story with me that he had built up resilience over the past 20 years. And I was seeing that play out in our struggle with infertility. And at first I was really mad. I was like, why aren't you miserable with me? I just wanted him to crawl into that angry, sad hole and pit with me, and he just wasn't having it. Because he knew that we could get through this, that this was not the end of our story, and that there would be another chapter. So finally, I picked myself up off the floor, and I said, you know what, there's something I can learn here. And I started talking to him more about his journey through the past 20 years. And then I started chatting with his family, and then I eventually reached out to an organization called Tuesday's Children. So Tuesday's Children is an organization that started after 9/11. It's a charity that provides healing for families who have been forever changed by terrorism, military conflict, or mass violence. They've done incredible things for John and his family over the years, as well as many other families impacted by 9/11 and war-related challenges. So I reached out to them just to, at first, express my gratitude and share with them what I've been learning from the children of 9/11, those children who lost parents that day. And through that conversation, they connected me with a dozen other 9/11 surviving children who were willing to share their stories. So what started out as a project to help myself through the most challenging time of my life turned into something that I realized would help others bounce forward from their tragedy by learning from those who did so in the midst of one of our nation's greatest tragedies. So we head to the next slide. I'll talk about how this led me to writing down my insights. And from these interviews and other conversations, my book, Rise from the Ashes, was born. The lessons that these folks have to share are poignant for anyone going through a challenging time. But there are so many reasons this group of 9/11 surviving children have been able to bounce forward from their tragedy. And during my research on the next slide, you'll see I was able to chat with Stacey Boyer, who's a licensed mental health counselor in Parkland, Florida. Stacey Boyer worked with those who were involved in the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas shooting at the high school in Parkland, Florida. And so she has lots of experience with post-traumatic growth. And she talked to me about how people who go through trauma can have growth come of it. And she said that post-traumatic growth can manifest in many ways, often meaning stronger relationships with those around them, heightened self-esteem, and a sense of deeper purpose for their lives. That deeper purpose, I saw this in so many of the 9/11 surviving children I spoke to. And I want to share an example here of Rebecca Episarro. Here's Rebecca with her family and her father, Carl Episarro. Rebecca was 9 years old at the time of 9/11, living in New York. Rebecca distinctly remembers kissing her dad on the cheek goodbye as he went to work. And unfortunately, that was the last time she saw or heard from him. Rebecca is one of 6, so a pretty big family. You can see most of them in that photo. I love that picture of all of them with their firefighter dad. Her father, Carl Episarro, was a firefighter at the 9th Battalion in Manhattan. He was 39 at the time of 9/11 and was on the way to the towers with 2 chiefs. After the towers fell, the chiefs took record of everyone who was with them, and that's when they noticed that Carl was missing. Very similar to John's story, there was no recovery of Carl, and so many of these 9/11 surviving families were left to bury an empty casket. And as challenging as this time was for Rebecca, as well as the years to follow, Rebecca has been doing incredible things in her life now. If you head to the next slide, you'll see Rebecca today. She's 30 years old. And in 2018, she became an FDNY firefighter herself, following in her father's footsteps. She shares that the process was intense, it included a ton of written and physical exams, but she also shares that there's nowhere she'd rather be because she's found that deeper purpose in her life because of what happened to her and her family that day. I love Rebecca's story so much because she joins 3 of her siblings. So 4 out of the 6 of them have all gone on to be FDNY firefighters, which is an incredible testament to the legacy that their father left behind. When facing adversity, post-traumatic growth can lead to better awareness of our vulnerabilities and limitations, and doing so may be the driving force behind the children of 9/11 sharing and growing from their stories. In addition, these stories add new meaning and purpose to their lives. But what about for us who aren't 9/11 surviving children? How do we learn to bounce forward? Chances are, if you're not in a storm now, you've either just been in one or you better be preparing for one. For me, finding that greater purpose has meant continuing to share my story. As painful as our walk with infertility has been, as painful as John's story of losing his father continues to be, the more I've shared, the more I realize that I'm not alone, and there are countless others who are walking the same path. Through that, I've been able to find a community of people who will sit with me in my pain, and probably most importantly, I've learned how to sit with myself in my own pain, which is the most challenging thing I've had for the past few years. As we head to the next slide, we're going to talk about the decisions that people have to make and how do we move on past our own challenges. How do we take these ideas off of the page and out of the book and create long-lasting impacts in our communities? And after a tragedy, people are often faced with difficult decisions. So many of them, I can't name them all here, but some of them include, should I return to work? Should I return to school? And how will I reintroduce myself to society after this challenging time? And while stepping back into routines after a tragedy is immensely challenging, many of the 9/11 surviving children I spoke with feel that their lives were better, as well as the lives of others around them benefited for it. While no one would ever choose to lose their parent, or to go through infertility, or go through the myriad of other things we've gone through in the past few years, I do believe that my husband is a better coworker, leader, and all-around person because of what he went through. These moments help you to gain gratitude for every moment you have and the resilience to get through the tough ones. But how do we teach people to be there for others as they recover? This is the most challenging thing. We can start with empathy training. But the thing with empathy is that empathy is an emotion. When we talk about folks who are empaths, they are typically those who are emotionally invested in the plight of others. But it's not something that you can make someone else feel. What empathy training can do, however, is give people the skills to care for people. So even if you're not feeling it that day, or you're not feeling it at all, you can put these practices in place. And just like anything, these become muscle memory after we build a habit and can be repeatable, lifelong practices when interacting with others. So how do we put this into practice? Today I'm going to share 8 ways you can cultivate empathy in your own life. I'm going to start with cultivating curiosity. It's important that we develop an insatiable curiosity about the particulars of those you meet. When we spend time with people that we know less well and ask them about themselves, how they are, and what their life is like, we are able to cultivate empathy. The second would be to step out of your comfort zone. When we learn something new, or we take that chance, or we go to travel somewhere new, we can see what it's like to be out of our own comfort zone. I'll never forget the first time I traveled to a country where I didn't know the language. That feeling of being out of my comfort zone, of not being able to do the things that the people who live there are able to do, was incredibly humbling and can be a great step in cultivating empathy. Number 3 is to receive feedback. This is a really tough one for me. As important as feedback is, it can be tough to ask our family, friends, and coworkers to be honest with us when we're not doing things right. But when we do ask for feedback from friends, family, and colleagues regarding our active listening and relationship skills, we are able to learn where our gaps are so that we can cultivate better empathy. How can we improve, and what opportunities did we miss? Number 4 would be examining our biases. We all have them, and the important thing is acknowledging that these biases exist. As we acknowledge them, we are able to have greater capacity for empathy. Often without knowing, we judge others without even realizing why, whether it's because of the way they look or the way that they live. When we find opportunities to mix with other people of other backgrounds, we're able to put those active listening tools to the test and see how we are going about cultivating our empathy. Number 5 would be walking in the shoes of others. It's a lot easier said than done, right? We've all heard this phrase before. But it's important to understand what it is like for people in other situations. How do they live? How do they work? How do they share? What makes them happy, sad, excited, anxious? All of these things. I put this to the test recently working at Disney. I work with many global teams all over the world, and we're constantly on Zoom all day, like many of you, I'm sure. And the thing is these folks are from different places with different cultures and different backgrounds that I don't understand. And so as I've taken the time to meet with these folks one-on-one, I have learned so much more about why it is each and every one of these individuals does the things that they do. And it helps us to be better coworkers. And really, at the end of the day, it's a great business model as well, because we're able to produce better work. Number 6 would be having difficult, respectful conversations. While it can be hard to challenge or be challenged by alternative points of view, a few simple lessons can help, whether that's listening and not interrupting, a really hard one for me, and being open to new and different ideas, as well as apologizing if you found that you hurt someone else's feelings. A great example of this, as we have had so many different conversations about diversity and inclusion, as well as the Black Lives Matter movement, I felt uncomfortable because I didn't know what my voice was in those conversations. And yet I had to tear down those walls and say, you know what? I'm not always going to get this right, but I have to try. And what I found is that people are receptive when we take the time to listen and truly care about the plight of others. Number 7 would be to read widely, whether that's reading fiction, nonfiction, Content on social media, you have it. Make sure that you're surrounding yourself with writers and content creators who look and are different than you. That is going to help us to really increase our emotional intelligence and our capacity to empathize. And lastly, I would encourage you to join a shared cause. Research has shown that working together on community projects can help heal differences and divisions and remove biases. Whether that's funding a community project locally or in another country, or even joining a church group, political group, you have it. You're going to find people in those spaces that do not look or think like you, and that is a good thing. And if you're uncomfortable, then you're probably doing it right. That said, and a great example, well, I think it's a good example, of a shared cause that I would love to invite you to is the Rise Together community. Now that Rise from the Ashes has now launched, we have started a Rise Together community on Facebook where we are working how to cultivate empathy and instill that into our communities. So I hope that you'll find us there on Facebook and join us in this mission. Lastly, if you were moved by these stories and want to learn more about post-traumatic growth, about the children of 9/11, or really any way that we can really grow and move past our trauma, and not necessarily move past it, but work through it, then I encourage you to read Rise from the Ashes. Today you can purchase the book for $25, and $5 will be donated per copy towards the Tuesday's Children organization that I mentioned earlier. The thing is that none of us choose our tragedy, but because of it, we can be better leaders, friends, and family members who can advocate for ourselves and others. As the 9/11 surviving children enter adulthood, they too can be advocates for change. But the same can be said for any of us who have experienced grief and haven't found that our company or communities, families, or friends have found a safe place for us to bring our full selves. The empathy you gain as you walk life's most challenging times can become your superpower to shape the way you live and work. I want to thank you so much for supporting these families and their stories. I also want to encourage you to share your own story. And if you are feeling like you're in hell, keep going. And soon I know that you will find the tools and tactics you need to be able to rise from the ashes. Thank you. And at this time, I want to invite the family and friends of Dan Gallagher who are here with us today, and we're going to start our panel interview. Again, thank you all so much for being here today. If you wouldn't mind, we'll go down the line and you can share who you are as well as your personal connection with Dan.
Hello, my name is Tony Balone. I don't think I need this microphone. Dan was one of my roommates. We were roommates senior year. We lived in the Heights, myself and Don. Again, I don't know Dan Gallagher. I know Reds. Reds was what we called him, along with a bunch of other names, but we're going to keep it PG. I was reading the paper here, and there's some questions. Maybe, what was a memory of Dan? Well, I'll share my first memory of Dan. We were at a party, and I played soccer here. Graduated 2000, like Red. I played soccer about 60 pounds ago, and we would come early for the preseason. So the soccer guys, as a freshman, we would feel more comfortable, and we knew some faces. When we go to a party, we'd see the soccer guys who kind of stick together, and I see this kid dancing and backing up into people, and I'm like, who the heck is this guy? It was Reds. He was drinking Killian's Red. That was the beer of choice at that time. And he was going to have one, maybe two, maybe a little more. But that's my first memory of him. And he was just a fun-loving guy. If there was a place to have fun, it was with him. I can honestly say I don't remember him getting mad or yelling. I remember people yelling at him. I just don't remember him yelling at others. He was the first one to help you. And that's why I'm here. I'm here because if it was the other way around, he would be here. And he was a great guy. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, my name is Sean Gallagher. I am Dan Red's brother. I would be one of the people yelling at him. Obviously, but I'm the older brother. So, obviously, we grew up our whole lives in New Jersey together. We went to the same grammar school, middle school, high school. But the only place we could go in tandem was to college each year. A couple memories. I'm going to share 2 quick ones. One was the first time I got humbled as a big brother by my little brother. We used to play basketball in our neighbor's driveway. We had a basket and we'd go out and play one-on-one basketball. And for years, I was taller, stronger, so I would just back him up, turn around, throw it in the basket, and usually win. Well, sometime around my sophomore, junior year, we're out there playing one day. I tried that old trick. I backed him up, turned around, and he grew up. And all of a sudden, he swatted that ball away, and I was like, okay, things are not going to be the same anymore. And they never were from that point going forward. He had surpassed me and went on to bigger and better things with that. The other thing I'll tell you, talking about the fun loving time. It was his freshman year, and he calls me up. I was down at the University of Delaware, and the school had closed right around Halloween, for deer hunting season or something like that. So I drive up, come get him, bring him down. It's Halloween. I have to get him a costume to go to parties with my friends. I went to a bunch of parties with my friends, and they just remembered him because he had on this hooded costume of some sort with his curly red hair kept popping out of the sides of it. And that's what people remember of him. And still to this day, probably starting tomorrow, I'll get a whole bunch of texts from my friends from college, and they'll say, thinking of you, but, and they'll always say they remember that time. So even far away from the campus of DeSales, he was making impressions on people in the same manner that he was here, which I think speaks to the consistency of who he was as a person. So, and I'll turn it over to my sister.
There you go.
Hi.
Would you please,
I was Danny's little sister, and there's so many memories to choose from, but one I think was when he was interning on Wall Street. I think was it Family? His boss had tickets to VIP tickets to a concert in near our hometown at the outdoor amphitheater. And instead of inviting a friend or someone else, he wanted to bring me. Sorry. It was so much fun. We got special seats, could go to a cool tent and get drinks, and he just always made me feel like a friend, never a bother. And he made everything so fun. Another memory just I can share real quick is that I grew up, I'm a ballet dancer. I danced throughout all my childhood, and he would volunteer to be an usher at the shows, and so he was just always so supportive and just always there. And I'm not as resilient right now.
That's okay.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Dominic Will. As Tony said, we lived with Dan, height 15, I think. And he was an ultimate friend. He was always happy. Never a dull moment with Dan. Never, you could find it fun in anything. One of the memories I like to share is we had a fire drill our freshman year. And we were all sitting up. There was a fire drill. Somebody may have pulled the fire. Somebody melted something in the microwave. I don't know. We couldn't go back to the door for a while. They may have been looking for stuff. I don't know. But I remember being outside. It was 4 in the morning. And it was freezing. And most of us were wearing shorts and t-shirts, responsible college guys that had to go out in the cold. And I remember 300 people out there. I remember Dan, who loved music. He was always listening to music, and there's certain songs I think to this day I think of. But I remember him just started belting out Piano Man. And then people started putting their arms around him and each other, and everybody was just there. And it started with Dan because he took a situation that was just awful. And he made it fun. And he made it, you know, and he included everyone. And when I look at that, it's just, you know, that's how he was. He always wanted to include people. He always wanted to be around people. He wanted to be like at the party. He always wanted to be there for you to make a situation that may have been awful fun. And he was just there. And he had a big smile, curly red hair. And, you know, he just got me excited to do things. And, you know, one of the biggest things I think he did, and, you know, we were all pretty close in college, and we were all pretty close with each other. But, unfortunately, you know, with the World Trade Center, it brought us closer together as a class, and a couple classes before and after this. And for years, we had, you know, the Dan Gallagher Memorial Barbecue at the Heights. So, for 10 years, we all came back to college. We all got together. And it was a time where we celebrated Dan. We got Dan's extended family. You guys became DeSales alumni just back then. But it really brought everybody together. And, you know, we really thank Dan for everything he gave us in that, you know, short time we all knew him. And, you know, he was wonderful as a person.
Thank you for sharing. And I know we also have Dr. Hojat with us virtually.
Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome all of you to DeSales University, and it's so good to see you, Sean and Aaron. I would like to talk about Sean, and please forgive me if I become emotional. Dan, I had Dan in several classes. He was very smart. He was articulate. He was very popular among students and also the faculty. And there was reason for his popularity. He's not only a good-looking guy, but also he was very smart. And most of all, he was very funny. He always could make everybody laugh. Even Aaron and Sean, I should tell you that he was making fun of your parents. And you know why? Because he thought that the age differences between him and Sean and his cute baby sister, she was calling Aaron my baby sister, the gap was very large, and he was making fun of his parent. I don't know what my parent was doing in between. But I should say that Dan had a vision. He exactly knew what he wanted to accomplish. And he always want to concentrate on the field of finance, and he made it. He want to work in the best place. He want to be a bond trader. He passed 37, he passed 64, and he was working exactly where his dream was. I had so many emails from Dan in my desktop that the last one, he was talking about, my dream came true. I have the best office. I have the best view. I love what I am doing. So you should know that Dan has a short lives, but he was a very, very happy individual. He confessed that his dream came true, and it was a very long message that he sent to me. And I printed all those messages and sent it to his mom because I want to share that happiness with his mother, that his son had a short life, but he was extremely happy. September 11 also had a major impact on U.S. economy. I'm an economist, so I have to share with you how it has changed America. After September 11, America is very different. At the beginning, the September 11 caused 59,000 people lost their job, 3,000 and people lost their lives, and 6,000 people injured, and the economy went into recession. But Federal Reserve and federal government know how to design policy to mitigate the economy. But let's think about the long-term impact of September 11 on us. Now we have government spent billions of dollars on war on terrorism. $1 trillion, $5.9 trillion is the war on terrorism. We created the biggest industry of all, homeland security, and now it become a new major at the universities. And also we had war in Iraq, we have war in Afghanistan, and we have also a significant impact on traveling. You all know how this tragedy affected the air traveling. We pay $7.79 billion. That would be the cost to the taxpayer because of the extra spending on airline security. And plus, the lost time in the airport is about $10 billion a year. So September 11 cost to United States in the long run is trillions of dollars. And I'm sure that if Dan was alive, Dan could question all of this cost to this society and also to the entire world. I hope we can do something about this, because 49% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I would end it here.
So we talked a little bit already about Afghanistan and how this has had a very personal impact on all of your lives, but also a very global impact as well. And so, Sean, I'd like to address the next question to you. I know that you were in the armed services, and so I wanted to ask, how did being in the armed services during that time impact you, especially with your personal connection, and how does that continue to impact you today, especially given recent events in Afghanistan?
Yeah, so for those of you that don't know, I served for over 20 years in the Army, and on 9/11 I was actually down at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. We had just finished a exercise that morning to get ready. My brigade was about to become the immediate reaction force for the nation in 10 days. So it had some profound impact on me immediately. You know, I was given time to come home and grieve with my family. And we had a service for my brother, much like for your husband and his family. But then I had to get back to North Carolina and be ready. So I think that the combination of some very close friends that were in my unit that were there for me personally, and right there when my family couldn't be because they were so far away. And then at the time I was able, my wife and I had just really started to talk to each other about being engaged. So having the ability to reach out and talk to my wife, now wife, then hopefully girlfriend at the time, proved to be very helpful in helping me deal with that immediately. So, you know, that was the immediate. But I spent the better part of the next 20 years in and out of places like Iraq and Afghanistan, serving the nation. And it was something that changed my life, both at the family level, but also at the professional level. So,
thank you so much for sharing. And you did mention about how your family and friends were really able to help you through that challenging time, and that's something I heard from many others I spoke to as well. There's sort of this the family, faith, and friends seem to be those cornerstones that really get people through challenging times. And I wanted to touch on that a little bit and just learn, what are some of the things you've learned over the past 20 years that have really helped you to cope with this tragedy and understanding it's a massive tragedy and we'll never truly recover?
For me, it is my faith. My faith gets me through every day. Every day, there's always a challenge, and it's every day you say that little prayer in your head to yourself. When we heard the news, we saw the footage on the TV. 6 of us met at a place, and honestly, we drew straws who was going to call. I lost, so I was the one that had to call. And when I called, I said, "Did Reds make it home?" That was how the first thing out of my mouth. I didn't know what to do, but I was the one that drew the short straw. But it's your faith. You have to trust in God, and day by day you take it. So.
I'll speak to the family side of things. It's a big part. For us, Aaron and I, and my brother, we lost our dad in 1989, so some 12 years earlier. So for us, I drew a lot of inspiration to keep going by looking at my mother, who had been handed not one, but 2 tragedies really, before she even turned 50. She lost her husband, and she lost her son. And I watched her go through the process and see her demonstrate strength and resiliency, and the ability to go on inspired me, and said to myself, if she can do it, then I've got to do it, because that's just going to let my mother down. And we relied on each other to get through those times, and we really did. So that's what
I second Sean. Of course, our mother was very strong. But I guess I just would always think of Danny when I wasn't shy or crying. I would try to channel his energy, bring fun and keep it light. I could see the good even when it's not.
I think it's said best, faith, it works in all ways, right? So faith gives you strength, faith gives you hope, and provides you what you need. Your friends and your loved ones, are there to be there. And when you turn to the people you love and you put, your needs to those loved ones, it really makes everything better. And then, as life goes on, I think, you turn to those relationships you have. And it could be somebody that like Cody and I talk to each other maybe once every 6 to 8 months, we get text from each other. But it's like we've seen, this is like college again, right? And I think we all have friends like that. So no matter where you are, no matter what's going on, you have friends that you can turn to, you have loved ones you can turn to, you have your wife you can turn to. I think that's really what's shown throughout this is you look for those areas you can turn to, and you embrace those, and you don't try to control the uncontrollables. You try to turn to things you can control, and really open your eyes to that love, and those friendships, and the faith that you have.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing. And I want to touch a little bit about what you mentioned about your mom and her resiliency. All of the 9/11 surviving children I talked about in my book all lost fathers. And at first, I didn't even recognize that was the case. And then I found a ton of research that showed that it was in fact 2/3 of the people who we lost that day were fathers or dads. And I think that speaks a lot to the work environment during that time, and that's a whole other topic for another day. But it also speaks to the surviving parent that was left behind. It was mothers. And what I found is that so many of these 9/11 surviving children have stated that it was their mom who was the hidden hero, and really kept things moving for them. And that's always inspired me. And so if any of you are parents out here and your child isn't maybe telling you that you're their hidden hero, I assure you they do feel that way. I mean, so many of them are like, I never told my mom this, but I'm telling you. And so I hope that gives you some encouragement today as well. And I wanted to touch more on that resiliency. So we talked a little bit about it. We talked about some of those things that helped us to cope. But what do you think is the importance of empathy in your own journey? And how has it changed how you interact with others having gone through this event?
Well, for me, before, let's take driving, for example. You're driving down the street, somebody cuts you off. You have no idea what's going on with that car. So, for me, every interaction, and I truly mean this, I try to be as positive and polite as possible. And even when you get the rude response, great, have a nice day, and walk away. So for me, it's just trying to be a bigger and better man for my children, for my wife, for my family, for my friends.
For me, trying to become empathetic is something I try to do, but I think I succeed at times, but other times I don't. It's a little bit easier at times for me to be empathetic to some things my children do. Other times it's hard for me to be empathetic. Same with some of the people at work that I work with. So I think it's something that you have to keep working on. And an event like 9/11 definitely opens up your aperture and builds a certain tolerance for you to begin to become more empathetic. But I think it's something we all continually have to strive and work at. I know I certainly do, and I think we all should strive to do that in our lives.
Yeah, similar to Tony and what Sean said, but I just try to be as kind as possible and as understanding as possible, because just like we've learned with grieving, it's different for everyone, and yeah, and some people just have a bad day and they help them together.
Yeah, red light and a green light, so I'm gonna go with the green light. I think it, as Tony said, it's difficult. I think it's really hard to kind of put yourself in other shoes, but it's one of those things, you never know what people are doing. You never know how their life's going. No matter what's going on in life, you got to step back and really kind of adjust your thought process in certain situations. And, it's not easy, but I think in difficult situations, take a step back. You have a mantra you say, or take a deep breath, or any of those things, and really looking at the whole situation and seeing what you can do to be better in that situation. And I think, I always look at, how Dan handled situations. It was to smile, step back, crack a joke, do something funny, diffuse it with humor. And when you do that, you kind of go through life smiling. So I think taking those tough situations and really taking a step back and just embracing it, making it smile about it.
Absolutely, thank you for sharing. And so it's likely that someone in this audience here live today or with us online is going through a challenging time. You don't all need to raise your hands, but I'm certainly in that bunch. And what would you say to that person? What is the one piece of advice you would want to leave them with today?
Well, he's playing over there. Just one day at a time, whether it's talking to the students. You got a bad grade. You know what? It's not the end of the world. Just do what you got to do. Put the extra effort in and take the next test. Trying for that job you really, really want, and unfortunately you don't get that job. Well, you know what? There's a reason why. I forget who said it. I'm not sure, but you said it. There was a plan. God had a plan for your father. His job was to save all those people. Well, maybe I'm going back to my job here. Maybe you wanted that job, but that wasn't the job for you, you know? So you just have to believe that everything happens for a reason. There's a reason why things happen, and you just have to put your trust in God. That's what
I always look at, you know, like Tony said perfectly, you have to put your trust in God, but understand that God only gives you what you can handle. You know, that's something my dad always used to say to me, and he only gives you the challenges you can handle. So it's going to get better. It's going to get, you know, resolved. The problem's going to solve itself in some way. Not that type of thing for that. And he's giving you the strength to deal with that situation at that time. You just have to look inward to pull that strength out. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I try to look at as we go through a lot of challenges we've had. Is I can handle this. I just have to find that strength to do it.
Yeah, and I think also it helps to pull out to see the big picture. And sometimes the silver linings, but sometimes the rejection is protection. And there's you're being maybe guided in a different way that you didn't expect, but sometimes a lot of good can come from something. But just to pull out the big pictures, there's usually something you can glean from it.
So in our house, every day is a challenge. Probably like in most houses, but our two children have autism, so you know every day is a challenge. But I just asked them to provide like 3 rules. 1 is to try their best. 2 is to never quit, and 3 is be kind to others. And I told them as long as they're doing that, they're going to get through whatever challenge lies in front of them, and they're going to come out on the other end better. And you know, I think that is a pretty good way to frame things when you're in the challenge. Is just try your best, don't quit. Things will get better if you don't quit, and to be kind to others. Because as you mentioned, everyone's facing a storm. We just don't know what particularly it is.
Absolutely. Thank you all so much for sharing. And I mean, that's encouraged me a ton during this time, just hearing all of your thoughts. I know being in the midst of my own storm, it is often hard to hear that it is going to get better because I'm living in where it's not better. And what I have realized though is that my test will become my testimony, and so I'm looking forward to that next chapter, and I hope that all of you, if you're going through a challenging time, that this inspired you as well. At this time, we are going to open it up to comments and questions from our in-person and virtual audience. So I'll turn it over to Jackie to help us with that conversation.
Thank you, Peyton. I do want to start with Dr. Hojat. I know that Dr. Hojat, you offer a very unique perspective here, especially your time here during 9/11 with your students. And if you could kind of just share about how you were able to handle that situation here on campus and hearing of Dan, to help the students.
I remember that day that I came to my office. I'm sorry, my dog is barking. I came to my office, and all the students came to my office and asked me, have you heard from Dan? And I said, I'm gonna call him. I will send an email. It didn't take too long that I remember Keith Thompson, his best friend, one of his best friend, came to my office and said, Dan is gone. And we all started to cry. And one way that you can get some relief from your pain is just don't be afraid to cry. Crying is not bad. You show your emotion, you show your pain. And after that, I went to my next class, and I just started to cry in front of 40 students in the classroom. And I told the student that this is the cost of terrorism. And the terrorist cost is not just economic cost, it's a human loss. So I started talking about American foreign policy. Because maybe we should redirect our foreign policy in order to avoid this kind of tragedy happen again. So that affected my life significantly, because I want to minimize this kind of losses. Is this loss is not just a loss to the family, is our loss to the community as a great citizens has been lost. So for me, I would say I show my emotion. I'm not afraid of that. And other than that, I will try to tell the student the truth. That we can do something about this to avoid future losses.
Dr. Hojat. Do we have any questions here in the room? I see Dr. Sue McGorgy. I know you were here during that time with Dan and knew Dan. If you would like to come up.
So thanks, everyone. It's great to see everyone here this evening. A couple things that were said. Short life, significant impact, really. Dan made everyone feel loved. He was empathetic, and he made you feel included. I was here for my first year when Dan was a freshman, so I remember him. I look at Aaron and I think, there were those red curls sitting in the back of my class. And I was a new faculty member, nervous, my first time teaching, but I could always look in the third row in the back, and Dan would be sticking out, bobbing his head with those red curls to everything I said. And I always loved Dan because he was a finance accounting major, but he had a minor or a second major in philosophy. He was a great thinker. And no matter what we were talking about in class, Dan would always offer his perspective. And I was amazed at his knowledge for his age and his maturity. While he made people laugh, he was always inclusive and encouraging. And we shared the dream, because when I was an undergraduate, it was my dream to get to Wall Street. And I shared with Peyton what that was like, because I was female. It was different on Wall Street for females, for sure. But Dan and I always talked about that. I tried to convert Dan to the marketing major, and it didn't work. He stuck with finance, but we always shared that dream. He couldn't wait to get to Wall Street. And he did. He did. And Reds did go home on 9/11. Reds went home. And we will never forget him here and his impact. And like Tony said when he was coming in the door this evening, I'm here because Reds would be here, and he's right. And we'll always remember. We'll always remember. Thank you. My students know I do this all the time. This is very special for me also because Peyton Lynch was one of my students here at DeSales. So it comes full circle to have her return. And I knew Peyton outside of DeSales because you may not know this, but she was also a very amazing theatrical performer in the area. And I said on my way in to one of the other attendees, this is one of the biggest performances of her life. And we're very proud of you, and we're glad that you're here. Congratulations, Peyton.
As we continue here, if we have anybody online that is joining us that has a memory of Dan or would like to share their story, you can offer it now and let us know. As I turn to the friends and the family of Dan, who has made such an impact here at DeSales University, he was definitely living the life, as we know, as St. Francis de Sales would say, be who you are and be that well. With that sentiment, I would like to invite any of you to share with our audience online and here in person any characteristic that really shined with Dan that you have always taken with you.
Biggest thing was Dan's just the way he lit up a room and his smile, always happy. And as Tony said, never heard me yell at anybody or let people yell at him. Or Sean yelling at him, parking lot at the Heights. But Dan's smile and just loving life. One of the things too that Dan really did was, as a friend, and we was the best. Dan would be the guy who was out the latest. But if he had to be somewhere in the morning for a test, for a study session, class, he was also kicking your butt out of bed and saying, let's go. Some of us wanted to sleep in, and he was, come on, we have class, let's go. I don't care where you're at. And so he was always there to really just pick you up no matter where you were, how you felt, what you did. But his smile was lit up the room. He was always, he walked in, you're like, all right, rest, and we're gonna have fun.
I think the one thing I would talk about my brother and is determination. The professors of Dr. Ojeda have talked about, he had a plan, and it was not something he came up with when he first arrived here to DeSales. It started back in middle school when he took a class trip to Wall Street. Spent time on the stock exchange, and then we lived obviously in an area where a lot of people did work in New York, in the financial center, many on Wall Street and towers. And he just cultivated those relationships and knew when he came here, he's like, I want to study accounting, I want to go work on Wall Street. Then did internships in the summer where he would take the train back and forth to New York. He knew what he wanted to do. And that's what he wanted to do. I mean, I vividly remember we went to the World Trade Center in the summer of '96, and I remember him saying, I want to work here someday in this area. We saw the bull and all the other iconic features you see down Wall Street. That's what he knew what he wanted to do. And that was before he even stepped here at DeSales. So, he was a very determined individual. He took that through every step of the process as Donovan talked about. And, he was where he wanted to be, as Dr. Ojeda said. So, I think that's the one thing I said to my brother. He was very determined. When he had a goal, he wanted to go get it.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. I know right now online we're getting so many friends of Dan. So thankful that we can continue to keep Dan's memory alive and John's father, Robert, his memory alive as well, and all the victims of 9/11. As we close here tonight, do we have any other final thoughts? Tahara, do you have anything?
I think Dan's memories would always be alive on the DeSales campus. He was so special to his friend. He was so special to the faculty. We will remember Dan as a very, very special person. He will always be with us because all those sweet memories, all those big laughs, and he was a happy camper. And I think that has a last impact on everybody. So we will remember all the happiness, and we all hopefully would try to be as happy as Dan was.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hojat. Again, I would like to thank all of you, Peyton and John Lynch, Sean and Aaron Gallagher, Donovan Quill, and Tony Balone, as well as our faculty, Dr. Hojat and Dr. McGorry. We would also like to thank all of you who are joining us here today, as well as all of our community online, parents, alumni, faculty, staff, and students, and our community members. As we continue to remember those who have lost their lives in 9/11, we continue to keep those and the survivors in our thoughts and prayers. On a final note, we wanted to share information with you today about Dan's legacy. Dan's family started the Dan Gallagher Memorial Scholarship Fund. Recently, the Gallagher family has made a generous gift of $10,000 to the fund. And if you would also like to make a gift, you can go to our website, which is alumni.desales.edu/honoring Dan Gallagher. We'd like to again thank you very much for joining us here tonight.